Honey, what are you thinking?
Podcast. It's about that time, man. Damn. I think my phone is running out of power or something. I guess I never charged it or something. I don't know. So, but anyway, what's going on? I just got in somewhere, so I needed to make sure my phone was charged because I'll need to use it later. But yeah, it's charging now. So, what's happening? How's everybody doing? I hope everybody's doing great. I hope you had a beautiful day, or if you're getting up, I hope you had an awesome night. So basically, everything's going pretty awesome. On to podcast number 19. Correct me if I'm wrong, should be number 19. And the question goes something like, what do you think about sex before marriage? What do you think about sex before marriage? You being me. Like men. Like you can rephrase it as, what do men think about sex before marriage? So I'll put it that way, like, what do you think about sex before marriage, or what do men think about sex before marriage? And look at me, a man who's had sex with several women before marriage, so most of who we are no longer together with, so pointing a finger would be a little bit hypocritical, do you think? Yeah, how just think about it, how hypocritical of me if I was to point fingers. So I would definitely wouldn't do that. Maybe I might a couple of times, but I'll try not to, because who am I to point fingers, right? But remember, I never swore a purity pledge. I was never interested in any sort of like binding covenant that keeps me from having sex. No, I never did that. So from the hip, I have no more right to say what men or women should do about this as much as the next human thing. I mean, think about it. I definitely expect sex like while dating. I openly don't mind it on the first date. No, it's awesome. I don't mind. If that's what happens, not that I'd push for it, but if we've had enough chemistry before the first date, I'm all in. Let's go for it. So think of it this way. I wouldn't even know what to advise somebody about that part, apart from just do what you feel is best. If you feel like you shouldn't have it before marriage, great. That's awesome. Just stick to your decision. Like you'll find the right guy for that. But if you feel like, you should, hopefully it's not because you're like under pressure or something. Nobody's pressuring you to do it. That's great. But if the guy happens to be like stressing you out about that, that's probably not a good man for you. I mean, you definitely know that, or you're feeling it. The fact that you're not comfortable with it, you shouldn't just go ahead and do that. And either way, as I always say, if you do what you feel is best, you'll have nobody to blame. And upbringing, like the way we grow up, it plays a role here. And sometimes maybe it's the way somebody grew up. I'll explain that. Sometimes circumstances or personal choices. I know like a girl or two who are virgins well into their late 20s, and they're still going strong. So compared to most ladies today, or compared to most guys today, those two virgins probably deserve some kind of award or something. And guess what? Some of them are actually in some solid, serious relationships, and they've managed to keep their virginity. So yeah, so think about that. Sometimes it's secondary virginity. Yeah, that's something. I don't know whether there's primary and secondary and anything above secondary virginity. I don't know about that, but yeah, maybe not. So what do I think about sex before marriage? So I think it's okay if you like it, if you want to do it. Like maybe you have a lady friend, or yeah, I have several like lady friends who told me about either reading it somewhere, or I think somebody mentioned it to her. So a lady friend of hers held back until marriage. Like she was holding it back like the ultimate gift for her dear newly wedded husband who couldn't wait to get her off her gown after years of waiting. Because they waited. The lady mentioned she kept it for her husband. So he had waited for years, and I think he probably did too. He was probably waiting too. But well, when they finally did it, Sid says they were both kind of bored, like nothing exciting happened. What she meant is there was nothing about what she had heard from her friends. Her friends had mentioned something like some crazy sex, shouts, mourning, and all that. But from what she had, it felt like a bland piece of meat, like a bland piece of pizza, something that was just not that exciting. And it left her wondering, like, what's the big deal? What's all this? Like, what are guys always hyping about sex? She didn't find what the fuss was all about. And she dug deeper, like, into her friends' stories to find out how the experiences were. And she was always impressed by how much fun some of them seemed to be having or had, like, sexually in their relationships. She was always surprised by it because they always explained, oh, we did this, we did that. But compared to what she had, she wanted to find out whether maybe her and her husband, maybe they did something wrong, maybe they messed up somewhere, they didn't know what to do. But she wanted to find out what's the difference, why was hers like sparkless. There were no sparks, no fun, no nothing. And she really wanted to get like to the bottom of it. Like hers was basically non-existent, and her husband, he felt it too, as far as she knew. And from what she heard, they didn't go that far after that. Like the sex part was just boring for them, and these are newlyweds. So from what she mentioned, they probably ended up divorcing. I'm not saying it's a good enough reason to divorce, but it happened with them, and this is a real life story. I'm not saying it's because of the sex. Maybe they had something else going on. I don't know, but based on what she said, it almost came off like the main reason was the sex was just so boring for both of them. Probably maybe they hadn't experienced it, but that's just one case in a lot of others, because we know most guys, some who've never done it before, and they wait until their wedding and everything's awesome and they go on to have pretty awesome relationships. So maybe theirs was just never meant to be, probably. Yeah, I mean, not two experiences or two couples can have the same kind of experience. So some hold on and have the best marriages, others hold on and as well, and things don't turn out as well as they thought it would. So yeah, that was just a story I needed to pass through. So let's move on. So what do you think about sex before marriage? I think you should just not go having sex with like random strangers. But how would you know what's good if you never tried it, huh? Maybe even with somebody else. Nothing to compare. If you don't have it, you'll never know what's good. Or basically, you have nothing to compare with. I know there are those who do it and are happy and contented. Like the first time they do it, they're happy, they're contented with everything. So I'd love to talk to some of those people and find out how they feel about it. But I'm yet to meet any of them. Like somebody who waited until that time. I've only heard stories about that. And this particular aspect turns out to be a double-edged sword. Like waiting, because some of those couples who held their horses until they had exchanged vows, some had some pleasing experience and happened to be more pleased with their sex than those who just couldn't hold back. So get a hold of this. Those couples that keep their hands and other parts of their bodies to themselves, they have had to be known, like it's known. Such couples are known to have better marriages. Did that make any sense? I hope it did. Or let me do it again. Some of those couples who waited like until they got married, research shows that they had better marriages. I don't know how true that is, but I just kind of heard it. So yeah, you can kind of look at both sides and decide for yourself which side you want to be at, because we know that both sides have their positives and their negatives. We know both sides have their successes and their failures. So you can't quite choose just and say like this side, these are the only chances of success in a marriage, or these are the only chances, or this is where most failures occur because they held on, or because they did it before, or because they never did it before marriage. So yeah, there are different ways to look at that. So moving on. But the scriptures say, I know what the scriptures say. Yeah, anyone who's religious will tend to stick to what it says. with the striking difference. Because today, it's quite different when you compare. You might be religious, so if you want to stick to the scriptures, great, awesome. But times have changed, right? It's slightly different. There are several differences, and these are the differences I want to draw out. Because today, guys are just getting married much later, 20s and the 30s, 40s. Think about it. Most grandparents are surprised. Like today, these days, most grandparents are quite caught by surprise by their grandchildren because they just don't say it. They just don't want to call it out because in their time, a 25-year-old man had a bunch of kids at home. Probably had his own house as well, supporting a wife and all the kids he had. Sometimes 10 plus kids and all that. So, but today, a guy at 25, I'm not saying all guys at 25, but today, a good number of guys who are at the age of 25, some of them have barely scratched the surface of what it means to get or stay in a job. Huge difference, right? Quite different compared to that time. So some are yet to figure out how an apartment looks like. I mean, some of them, they haven't gotten used to the dimensions of they only know how their mom's basement looks like. That's what they know, and it's all rent-free. So times have changed. Before that, a couple of years ago, guys had bigger responsibilities at a much younger age. But today, guys are a little bit older, but with a completely different lifestyle. You might find, like I mentioned, a 25-year-old man. 25-year-old man at that time, he had a family going and a house and a real job. But today, a 25-year-old is still playing around on YouTube and all that. Not all of them, of course, some of them, but there's a huge percentage. Yeah, a huge percentage of them that fall along that line. And so, going back to the question, what do I think about sex before marriage? Years back, those guys were getting married pretty early. So they didn't have to go through life with all those sexual temptations and urges. They were married, so they got it off with each other like pretty early. It's not like they had to keep going looking for random women or random guys. But in today's world, guys are not getting married that early. And so in comes premarital sex. No, you get it? So then again, there are couples who hold on until they're married, regardless of age. So maybe it's a matter of control, like self-control. But, it's easier said than done, right? I'm not saying we can do whatever we put our minds to, can't we? We can do anything if we set our mind to it. I really do believe we can. Maybe sometime in the future I'll change my mind, but until then, I already started. I already had sex before marriage, so it's not like I can backpedal and change any of that. And it's not like I want to go back and change any of that. I love the experience. I love what I did. I wouldn't do it any different. So I don't really see a way back. Virginity once lost maybe can't be reclaimed. Oh, don't tell me about it's being done in the hospitals. I know about that, but I'm saying like deep down, like you're not going to get it back if that's what you really want. So what do I think about it? If you've already done it, I think you should probably love the experience you had. Everything we do in life, good or bad, there's always a good lesson. Personally, mine, I love everything I did. I wouldn't take it back. None of it. None of those ladies, none of that sex. I loved it all. I'm not taking it back. And if I get reincarnated, like I heard it happens, I hope I do the same thing. Or maybe it might be worth to try it a little bit different. Maybe I might be missing out on something else. Alrighty, moving on. So remember, the question is, what do you think about sex before marriage? And I think it's alright to do it since I already did it myself. And I still find it like, okay, for those who want to wait, it's alright for them. They can do that. Some say it helps couples since sex brings on intimacy. However, what keeps those couples who never had it together? What keeps them together? Like, if they've never had sex, what keeps them together? Because some people say, oh, you need to have it in order to have intimacy. What do you say about the guys who never had it yet they're still together and they go on like for the longest period of time, all the way to marriage? What can you say about that? If not sex, what? Because there are those who know, there are those who've waited until marriage. What was that about? Can you say that, oh, what kept them together? If your only conclusion is that sex kept them together, what about those who waited until they tied the knot? What would you say about that? So somebody clarified on that and told me anyone can have sex with anybody. But intimacy grows not just purely based on sexual intercourse, but on working together as a couple, like as a team. When people know what they're working towards. That's what, like, he explained it in a slightly different way. He mentioned that it's not just about sex is not all about, that's not what brings out the intimacy. That because anybody can have sex with anyone, it doesn't bring out that intimacy. So it's that commitment that brings in the intimacy. Remember, there are several types of intimacy. There's the physical, which seems to be the one I'm going after. We also know intellectual and emotional. Physical is what we know, like based on feelings, sex, physical contact, and anything to do with the physical aspect of our lives, the physical aspects of our lives. Emotional is about mainly trust, where you can let someone else you can let someone else know you better. While intellectual is where you connect with someone in thoughts, the way you think, and oh, don't forget spiritual. There's spiritual intimacy as well, where you connect based on your beliefs, like God, the universe, or any such belief system that you might share with somebody else. So, back to the point, saying that sex is intimacy would be fooling ourselves, or it would be a way of trying to fit it in our own understanding into a small cranny, knowing that there's so much more we are not letting on. We can't just purely drop it and say, oh no, intimacy is all based on sex. If you're referring to just physical, like the physical aspect of it, you're missing out on all the other aspects, like emotional, right? There is emotional, there is intellectual, there is spiritual. So it kind of canceled what some people say, that without that physical intimacy, that it won't work. Not necessarily. We've just realized that there are other aspects that contribute to intimacy, not just the physical aspects. And if that's the only way it worked, if it was all about the physical intimacy, what about those couples who waited? What would you say about that? I'd love to hear a contradictory point to that. So we won't do that. We'll face up to the truth. We did it because we could, or maybe we didn't know better, but no regrets here, right? If you did it already, face up to the truth. You did it because you wanted to, not because you didn't know. Maybe some people didn't know better, but no point in regretting it, really. Just move on with it. You had sex before marriage, great, no problem. I did too. I'm not regretting anything. Moving on, remember the question is, what do you think about sex before marriage? So I've seen a couple of people who mentioned finances, because there are so many couples who are genuinely in love with each other, yes, yet they just can't afford the financial toil that demands that's required of a wedding. Like, I mean, it takes finances. At all on your finances, you need to have your finances ready, a good amount of cash to actually hold a wedding, especially if you're planning something big, where you need to invite friends and other people. That's when you're thinking about the big kind of marriage, kind of wedding. So I know many, especially the older couples, who got kids first. So it started with the kids, which obviously involved having sex. Then they got hitched later. They planned the wedding a little bit later. They had the actual event. They didn't wait first until they had the wedding, because different couples, different situations, different financial situations. So, but this never stopped them from getting married and enjoying success in their unions. We know today, most couples, a good number of them, they usually want to get everything together before they can do the actual wedding, like with the friends present, their families, their relatives. They need them there. They need them to attend their wedding day. So with that in mind, they choose to instead start a family first. And for most people, I know it's worked just as well. They started with their family first. Like they had sex first, And then came the marriage. So, question of what do you think about sex before marriage? I think it depends. If finances are considered, some guys just can't wait until they have enough bank to have a real wedding. So since and when some people say no, you don't have to have an expensive wedding. Not everybody thinks like that. Some people really want to have it the big way. So instead of waiting for that, they just go ahead and get the kids first, and then the wedding follows. Yeah. So what do I think about that? Very much all right, because I've seen it happen hundreds of couples, if not thousands, and it worked pretty well. Because if they chose to wait until they did the big church wedding and all that, they might have waited forever. I mean, they got it right. They did it their way, and it worked out pretty well. All right, let's move on. What about compatibility? Right? Some people say, but if we don't have sex before marriage, how will we know we are compatible? Right? I've heard people say that. So some people say, shouldn't I have sex before marriage first? My point is, I never thought about compatibility in that manner. I was all about just like we needed to just have it. Like instead of waiting, I was never about waiting for years until we get married. I just never found that necessary. So just to be sure, some people say I know some guys who they wanna be sure that they're good for each other in the bedroom. Well, not really, because compatibility, at least in the bedroom, revolves around finding out what the other person wants or needs out of it. It's focused on communication. It also develops and evolves with time. Just because the first time wasn't all sparks and fireworks doesn't mean it has to stay that way. You communicate, you exchange ideas, and you realize what might not have happened the way you both would have wanted it. If something's different, you can always switch it up, change it, and have a better one. Just because the first one wasn't that good. And you can't say you have to try first to be sure that it's gonna be awesome. No, you can always work on it. So I don't really believe that I'm doing it because of compatibility. No, that would just be an excuse if I said, oh, I really need to find out if we are compatible sexually. Not really, right? Like I want to find out whether we are good fit for each other in the bedroom. No. So the excuse that you need to have sex before marriage to determine compatibility just doesn't stand the actual test. It doesn't stand it. Too many holes in it if you think about it. With a bit of compromise and understanding, any couple that decides to have sex only after marriage can work it out. This is nothing new. It has been done and it's still being done. So no solid reasoning behind that one. Having it because of compatibility, because we want to find out if we are compatible? No. Not really. You can do it and you can use that as a reason, but you know that's not a real reason. Not really. Because if you say we really want to find out whether we are good for each other, that's not necessarily the way it works. If a couple is completely determined to make it work, just because the first time wasn't all great, they can always work at it and figure it out. Right? Like I mentioned, communication and understanding and patience. It solves the problem. Any problem, actually. All right, we're done with compatibility. So I did this in a bid to find compelling reasons why it would be necessary to have sex before marriage, but there just doesn't seem to be much behind it, apart from, of course, our desire to please whoever we are dating, our desire to please ourselves, or the myriad other reasons we tend to have for why we choose to do it. We always have different reasons. Ask different people, ask different men, why did you do it? Oh, I needed to please myself. I needed to please whoever I was dating. I did it for them. I did it for myself. I did it for marriage. No, not marriage. I did it for a relationship. So everyone is doing it. So why should I be left behind? That's another question. And basically here comes the fear of missing out. When others are doing it, you want to be doing it too. And guess what? That's a real thing. FOMO, right? You know that, FOMO, fear of missing out. Well, for most of us, it's not an anxiety or anything serious. No. Think of it as the same experience you go through due to social pressure. Like peer pressure, when your friends are all doing it and basically almost everyone else on the planet is doing it, having sex before marriage. Some guys really want to they can't afford to not be part of that group. Fear of being left out or fear of missing out. So you want to get it on the action. And that's where most of us fall into. Most of us did it because our friends were doing it, right? And because everybody else we know was doing it. And most men realize they have no right to request or demand a virgin for a wife. After what they've been running around doing with different women, they've been doing it themselves before marriage. So why or what right does a man have to go out there and say, "Oh, I expect to have a virgin"? What are they talking about? Like, right? What would I be talking about if I said that? Especially after like you're a couple, you've been doing it forever, just wouldn't make any sense. Just because you can't prove your virginity, like guys know if they were questioned, they can always say, "Oh yeah, I'm a virgin," but they know the other party can't. So that would be kind of like taking advantage. So what do I think about it? I find that I wouldn't give an excuse like oh, I did it because others were doing it. No, I did it because I wanted to. And what do I think about it? I still stand behind my reasoning. It's all right. If you have a different reason religiously, no problem. I don't fight that. I don't have a problem with that. I'm not telling people to go out there and do that. No, but personally, it's my personal opinion and that of other like-minded men. We're okay with it. And actually, that changes when it's about your daughter. Yeah, when you're young and you're having fun, you're like, "Oh, it's no problem. Yeah, it's all right." But when it comes to your daughter or you, I don't know much about sisters, but when it's your own daughter, you're like, no, you gotta wait until you're married. Yeah, just putting it out there. Moving on to what do you think about sex before marriage? At this point, we all know sex does not mean marriage. Nothing guarantees that a guy will marry a girl just because you have sex with them. So if that's what he's saying or that's what you're operating under, forget about it. A better reason to have sex would be necessary, like not just his promises. If you're doing it because you want to do it, great, that's awesome. Doing it because he wants to, great, no problem. I know I'd have married most of my exes if something messed up hadn't happened. Also, remember the mistakes of youth. Like, you don't have to feel like if I don't do it before marriage, we'll probably not go farther. No. But at the same time, some guys are really committed. It's not about the sex part. They're really committed to their relationship. And sex just happens to be part of the commitment they expected. So, just like I mentioned, it's not for every guy. Some guys just want to have sex and move on and go play around with other women and probably move on with other girls. But some, and a good number of them, are actually committed. So you can't say, "Oh, he just wants to have sex and leave," or no, it doesn't work like that. Some guys are actually committed to it. So you had sex with somebody else maybe, and then once the guy finds out, and these things, they have a way of coming out, relationship over, right? So or maybe he cheats and you find out, same thing, messes up the whole relationship. So back to the start, but moving forward. If you're doing it, do it because you want to do it. That way, if you feel bad later or something happens and you're not happy about it, or you feel like you messed up, you'll have nobody to lay the blame on. So, as I always put it, do it because you want to do it. Obviously, you have your own form of your own way of thinking. You have a reason why. If you decide to do it, you know why. You have a good reason. You're probably in love. You've been in a stable relationship. You probably know him. You know him well enough, or you can trust him. If not, you really don't have to. And at the end of the day, you'll have nobody to blame, right? So if you're doing it, do it because you want to do it, not because anybody told you to or because anybody forced you to. Forced, that would be messed up, because now you know that's completely different. But if it's forced, that's where the law comes in. But anything else, you don't really do it because other people told you to. If you do it, at the end of the day, if something happens, if you get your heart broken, you'll end up blaming other people. And we are not into the whole blame game. So think about that. Moving on to what do you think about sex before marriage? I can put it this way. I do know some couples who are grateful they had sex before marriage. They found out a lot that they couldn't work with, right? Like they found out, oh, maybe I'm not into this, or maybe I'm not into that. Turns out some of them were just more different than they had imagined. Not that like being different is bad, no. It can be the best thing for a couple, but with some of those couples, they simply found things that happened to be deal breakers. Some found out their better half was actually hiding behind the curtains. In actuality, she was probably a lesbian, or maybe the lady found out the guy was actually gay. So they just like, so for some of those couples found out the person they were dating or the person they were almost getting married to, they were just presenting a front to the rest of society. They were hiding behind the marriage. They were hiding behind the marriage, and that good thing. So some of those couples, they were grateful that they did it before marriage because they found out early enough. They didn't have to first tie the knot, settle down, and then later they found out, oh, I'm actually gay, or I'm actually a lesbian. I'm not open. I don't want society judging me or knowing that. But so they end up hiding behind the marriage, and when they're in that kind of relationship, their spouse ends up basically being ignored because they are not interested in that relationship. They simply needed to hide behind it, which is not fair for the other party. So personally, I'd think about that for a while. I think about that because if that's where sometimes you gain the points for having it before. Again, maybe they could have made an arrangement later in life, like after the marriage, but some just felt that this was not a life they were cut out for. Being there for somebody else simply because they needed to hide who they really are. It kind of felt like they were being manipulated to stay in a relationship where they were not getting the kind of satisfaction they wanted. Because if a man says, oh, I only married you, but I'm actually gay, I just didn't want my family to know. Not cool. So some of them said, I'm lucky I actually had that sex before marriage because I found out he was actually gay but just needed a wife and a family to put out there. And such a lady was happy that she found out early enough. Right? Yeah. So back to the question, just in case you forgot it, it's all about what do you think about sex before marriage? Again, I got this from somebody who mentioned that sex before marriage makes your guy lose interest. Somebody mentioned it. And if you've been operating on that notion, well, that's just a fallacy. And I'm not just saying that. I never lost interest in any woman I had relations with, ever. It was nothing to do with the sex, something else, anything, maybe personality or something I had completely overseen. But it was never because I had sex and therefore I lost interest. Guys rarely have a problem with the sex. A woman has the tools. Like women, on the other hand, might not always get what they wanted. If, for example, the gentleman has challenges like premature ejaculation or erectile dysfunction, or maybe his penis doesn't match up to her standards, yeah, it matters to some ladies. But remember, a guy, all he's looking for is a girl that he's attracted to. He knows if she has a vagina, it works perfectly. Great, awesome. But so guys are not really losing out on anything here. He's not gonna lose interest on anything unless, of course, she just lays back in bed and lets him do all that. That's a little bit boring. But the ladies might lose. So the fact that she said that guys might lose interest in marriage because they had sex with the lady, not really. A lady might, when she finds out the guy has, like I mentioned, sexual, the inability to perform, she might lose interest because she didn't know about that before. But a guy, he already knows, like he doesn't have a lot of problems. All he needs is to get it up and get it going. So, no. Guys, no. For guys, it doesn't work like that unless he was obviously a player and he was only interested in the sex. So, other guys, no. And remember, this doesn't apply to all guys, of course, because some jerks just want to have sex, then leave the lady, and we know they're out there. And now that's a completely different kind of guy, not the kind of guy I'm talking about. Good guys are not really into that. And from a moral high ground, which I won't take here. I won't take the moral high ground, obviously. I'm not fit for that. I'd probably say abstain. Remember, I'm not talking from a moral high ground. I'd probably say abstain. But being an active participant sexually on the planet, a human being alive and breathing, part of the statistics, I'd say, do what you feel best. I'm part of the statistics. I'm part of the people having sex before marriage and all that. So I'd say do what you feel is best. I wouldn't go telling you not to do it, but based on the points I've given before, you can always strike out a good judgment of what you think is best. Most of us really don't have a problem with it unless there's some religious affiliation that binds us to not do it before. Most of us don't really have a problem. Most men. So there's a lot to go with in both sides. Those who say it helped them avoid making a colossal mistake, getting married to like an incompatible person, while others, there's the other group which says they only have praise for how abstaining worked magic for their marriages. Those who already did it and got married, they enjoy not having the displeasure of having an unlikable wedding night surprise. You know what I'm saying? Like if you've already done it before, you already know what you're expecting. You already know what to get. So you don't have the fear or having to find the surprise that, whoa, after the wedding, this is really not what I wanted sexually, right? Because you've already done it, so you know who you're getting married to, right? Those who wait cite the purity, like, oh, it was pure, we enjoyed each other for the first time. So some men and women want that. They want that, like, coming in pure, like they were just for each other, great soulmates. Yeah. And some women and men want the test drive first. They want to test drive. They want to make sure everything's great before they actually tie the knot. So just to be sure, because they just want to be sure what they'll be getting for the foreseeable future or for the rest of their lives. So at the end of the day, what do I think about it? I think go right ahead and have it. Yeah, if you at the end of the day you both know you're serious, and if you're not playing around, both of you, just settle down and do it already. Yeah, if you wanna wait, great, go ahead and wait for it. And with that, I'm gonna call it a day or I'm gonna call it a night, depending on where you are. If it's nighttime, great, you better have an awesome, great day. If it's nighttime, great, go right ahead and have an awesome night. I hope I said that right. If it's daytime, have a great day. If it's nighttime, have a nice night. Bye bye. Catch you later.